All right, so picture this a metaverse, right? But instead of it being like all dreamt up in Silicon Valley, it's being built by Jamaican youth.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool, and that's what we're diving into today.
Okay.
It's called Project Amplify.
I like it.
It's an initiative by Youth Can Do IT, and let me tell you, these young minds have some seriously insightful things to say about building a responsible digital world.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Because we often hear about metaverse ethics from, big tech companies.
Yeah.
But this research is really interesting because it gives a platform to a group that we don't really hear from that often.
Yeah.
And it empowers them to be the architects of this new world, not just the users.
Exactly. And what we're looking at today is we're doing a deep dive into a brand new research paper, hot off the presses. It's called Co-Designing Metaverse Ethics, Perspectives of Jamaican Youth.
Wow.
And get this is these young people actually designing ethical guidelines for the metaverse. So it's not just theory.
It's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
And I think the timing couldn't be better because we're seeing that the Caribbean is starting to make waves in the metaverse.
Yeah.
Barbados is creating a virtual embassy. St. Vincent has experimented with virtual carnivals.
Wow.
So it's really interesting to see this kind of new frontier opening up.
Yeah, it's not just recreating what we do offline either.
Right.
And I think this really stood out to me because one of the quotes from a 10-year-old participant in the program said, "What older people think is fun isn't what we think is fun." And that just hit the nail on the head for me because, we need young people's perspective to build a metaverse that is going to be relevant to them and that they're going to want to engage in.
Absolutely. And it highlights why we can't just copy and paste what works in, let's say, Silicon Valley.
Right.
What resonates with young people in Jamaica or any other community for that matter is going to be shaped by their unique experiences and perspectives. And so I think this research really emphasizes the importance of context and making sure that the metaverse reflects a diversity of voices.
And that's huge.
Huge.
Yeah, and especially with something like this that, it's this blank slate almost that we're looking at this whole new world and how do we make it ethical from the start?
Exactly.
So that's, I think, a really good point.
And they're already living in it in a way that, adults aren't. They're digital natives.
Exactly.
This is their world.
So it makes sense to get their perspective on how to do it right.
100%.
It really does. I mean, like you were saying, it's such a blank slate. And they're the ones who are really going to live in this world. So to get their perspective from the get-go is amazing. But I want to dive into those guidelines a little bit.
Okay.
Because they actually, in the research paper, they outlined 5 key areas that they focused on: privacy and data protection, autonomy, human flourishing, inclusivity and accessibility, and then reducing deceptive design.
Right.
So did any of those really stand out to you?
All of them are so interesting, but I think one that's really timely is this idea of privacy and data protection.
Yeah.
Because I think we can all relate to just blindly clicking agree to all those terms and conditions online.
Oh, yeah.
Like, who reads those, right?
It's like reading another language, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. And so I love how these students really took that concern to heart and envisioned a solution that they called metapods.
Okay.
And it essentially would be like your own personal data vault. And it's actually inspired by this real world concept called solid pods. And basically you decide who can access your data in the metaverse and what they can use it for.
Oh, wow.
So it gives you a lot more control and agency over your own information.
That's amazing. So they went from problem to solution.
Yes.
Which I love.
Yeah.
That's super cool. What about autonomy? Because that was another one that really stood out to me.
Yeah. And this one I think is really important because they came up with this concept of an autonomy life cycle.
Wow.
So recognizing that it's not enough to just give someone control.
Right.
You also have to guide them on how to use that control responsibly.
Okay.
Right. So almost like imagine these checkpoints throughout your metaverse experience. So maybe when you first log in or when you're about to make a big decision or even when you're leaving a virtual space.
Okay.
Each checkpoint is designed to kind of help you pause and think about your choices.
Yeah.
And how they might impact yourself or others.
Wow.
So it's really about kind of building in those ethical considerations.
Yeah, baked in.
Exactly.
Not just an afterthought.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. The other one that, well, actually, all of them are really fascinating, but human flourishing, that one really stood out to me because I feel like that's something that sometimes gets missed.
Totally.
We're thinking about technology.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of it all.
Right.
And forget that.
The human aspect.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that they were thinking about with that?
So they really emphasize the importance of mental health in the metaverse.
Okay.
Which is so important because we're spending more and more time in these digital spaces.
Yeah.
So one of their suggestions was actually having mandatory mental health check-ins
Oh, wow.
at the start of each metaverse session.
Interesting.
And then also incorporating regular mental health breaks into the experience. So almost like built-in reminders to pause, reflect, and kind of check in with yourself.
Wow.
I know that might sound a little radical to some people.
It makes you think about it. It's definitely like a conversation starter for sure.
Absolutely.
But yeah, very interesting. And then, I mean, the inclusivity and accessibility, I feel like that goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
With representation.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that was a big focus for them as well.
Yeah, they recognized that from the beginning, you know, and I think for them, it wasn't just about representation. It was also about the practical barriers
Right.
that many people face when it comes to accessing the metaverse.
Right. Like the digital divide is a real thing.
Huge.
Yeah.
And so they actually proposed designing for low bandwidth.
Oh, wow.
So imagine a metaverse that's accessible even with the slower internet connection.
That would be amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
It'd be a game changer for so many people around the world.
100%. And then the last one, reducing deceptive design, which I feel like we've all been there where we're like, why am I still scrolling?
Right.
What is happening right now?
Those dark patterns get you.
Yeah, they really do. So I'm curious how they approach that one.
Well, it's interesting because these are digital natives, right? So they're already pros at spotting those sneaky design tactics that try to manipulate our behavior.
They probably know it better than we do.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
So they really emphasize the need to equip users with the skills to identify and navigate these dark patterns critically.
Oh, that's smart.
Right.
So it's like giving them the tools
Exactly.
to protect themselves, basically.
Yes, empowerment.
Yes. I love it. Okay. So they had all these amazing ideas and these 5 key areas that they were really honing in on. But I mean, we're talking about like young people tackling these like really complex issues.
Yeah.
So how did they even go about? Like, I don't know, was it overwhelming at first? Like, how did they actually manage all of this?
Yeah. Well, they had a lot of support, which I think is incredible. A research paper really highlights how they collaborated closely with university student facilitators.
Oh, cool.
So they had mentors.
Okay.
And they also had access to experts from various fields. So it was really this collaborative environment where they could bounce ideas off of each other,
That's awesome.
learn from professionals.
Yeah, that makes sense. So they had all these great mentors and experts helping them navigate these complicated topics, but it wasn't all like work and no play, right? Because I read in the paper about this like breaking the rules session,
Yeah.
which sounds kind of mischievous and fun.
They basically got to let their inner hackers loose.
Okay.
So first they created their own content moderation rules for their metaverse spaces.
Okay.
And then, this is the best part, they brainstormed ways to break or bend those very rules.
Oh, that's smart.
So you can imagine the creativity and critical thinking skills that came into play there.
That's like next level thinking right there.
Yeah.
To like create the rules and then be like, all right, how do we get around them?
Exactly.
I love that. But let's talk about the real world for a sec, because I know like even just trying to like join a Zoom meeting sometimes with a bad internet connection is a nightmare.
Oh, tell me about it.
So I can't imagine trying to build a metaverse with like, you know, spotty Wi-Fi. Was that ever an issue for them?
Oh, definitely. The paper mentions that slow and unreliable internet access was a recurring challenge, especially during their in-person design sessions.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even with the best intentions and brilliant ideas, the digital divide is a very real barrier.
It is, and it's something that, you know, we can't forget about as we're developing all of this new technology in these new spaces.
For sure.
Yeah. But even with those challenges, they still managed to actually build their own metaverse spaces, right?
They did. And what impressed me most was that it wasn't just about the technical achievements.
Right.
The project really emphasized the importance of developing those social and emotional skills as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So things like teamwork, communication, problem-solving, empathy.
Right.
Like these are valuable life skills.
That would they'll carry with them far beyond the metaverse.
Yeah, you're learning how to be a human in the world
Exactly.
by doing this, which is amazing. And there's a quote that I wanted to make sure that we talk about because I thought it was really powerful. And it was from one of the project coordinators. And I think it really kind of sums up the impact that this project had.
Yeah.
Do you remember that quote?
I do. They were talking about how blown away they were by one of the students' designs.
Yeah.
And how the student was able to connect with others through their metaverse design and how they use their creativity to solve real world problems. And to me, that just shows that when we give young people a voice in tech development, even small steps can have a ripple effect.
It's true. And I think so often young people are kind of like shushed and told to wait their turn.
Right.
But they have so much to offer. They're already living in this world.
Exactly.
We need to listen to them.
100%. So I think this has been such a great conversation. So many things to think about. But for someone like me who is, really interested in this world of tech, but also wants to make sure that it's ethical and that, we're not just creating a monster here.
Right.
What would you say are the biggest takeaways from this deep dive?
That's a great question. I think for me, it boils down to a few key points.
Okay.
First, we desperately need diverse voices in ethical tech design, especially young people.
Yeah.
They bring those fresh perspectives and lived experiences that are often overlooked.
So important.
Second, we need to create spaces where young people can lead, innovate, and shape the future of technology.
Yeah.
And finally, I think we need to remember that even small-scale projects can spark big changes.
It's true.
Project Amplify started in Jamaica, but its message of ethical tech design resonates globally.
Yeah, it does. And I love how this research kept kind of circling back to this idea of building ethical humans, not just ethical tech.
It's a good point.
And I think that's something that's really stuck with me, because if we see the metaverse as this extension of ourselves,
Right.
It makes you really think about the values that we're embedding in these digital worlds that we're creating.
It all comes down to what kind of digital future we want to create, and how can each of us contribute to building a metaverse that really reflects our shared humanity and our highest aspirations.
Such a good point. Such a good point. To leave it on, I think, for everyone listening, think about that. What kind of world do we want to create, and what can you do today and make a difference in that? Because it's going to take all of us to make sure that it's a good one, right?
100%.
Awesome. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. I've learned so much, and thank you for joining us on this episode as we explore the incredible world of Project Amplify.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Of course, and thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. As always, we'll see you in the metaverse.